Hey everyone. Ready to really dig into how doing good in business can actually give you a leg up on the competition?
That's right.
So we're going deep on chapter 19, the ethics advantage.
Okay.
And yeah, it's from a business book, but trust me, there are some seriously wild stories and stats in here that'll make you think. We're going to uncover how making ethical choices can actually lead to long-term success.
Right.
How to handle those super tricky ethical dilemmas that come up,
Yeah.
and even how vulnerability can be a secret weapon for ethical
Oh,
leaders.
that's interesting.
It's a good one.
Yeah, it is. It's fascinating how the whole idea of ethics in business has totally changed.
Yeah.
It used to be this afterthought almost, like
Yeah.
something separate from the actual business.
Uh-huh.
But now it's totally woven into a company's success.
Totally. It's not just like a side project anymore. It's
Right.
core to everything.
It is.
And the chapter starts with this awesome story about Patagonia's founder, Yvon Chouinard. Back in the 70s, their best-selling product,
Uh-huh.
these steel pitons,
Yeah.
they found out they were actually damaging Yosemite's rock faces.
Oh, wow.
So he did something kind of radical. He phased them out.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Basically took a hit to his own business to protect the environment.
It's amazing. It seems so counterintuitive, but Patagonia's success totally challenges that whole nice guys finish last thing.
Right.
They didn't just sell products.
Yeah.
They aligned themselves with values that their customers were super passionate about.
Yeah.
And that's powerful.
And it's crazy to think they became a billion-dollar company in part because of that decision.
It's true.
It totally debunks the myth that ethics and profits have to be at odds.
They don't.
No. And speaking of profits, the chapter talks about this ethics revolution that's happening right now. And the numbers are pretty wild.
Yeah.
Companies with strong ethics are seeing 33% more customer loyalty.
Wow.
38% better employee retention. And a 27% higher market valuation than companies that aren't prioritizing ethics.
That's incredible.
That's a big deal.
It is. It really shows how much the business world is changing.
Yeah.
Consumers are way more aware these days.
Yeah.
They have access to so much information. It's easy to research a company's practices.
Yeah.
And studies show that 76% of consumers would switch to a brand that aligns with their values,
Really?
even if it means paying more.
Wow, that's huge.
It is.
So building an ethical business isn't just about feeling good. It's about connecting with this massive group of people who actually want to support businesses they can trust.
You're right.
It makes you realize that strong ethics are just smart business.
It's not just about doing the right thing.
Right.
It's about realizing that ethical business practices are key for growth and profitability.
Totally. And I know what you might be thinking.
What's up?
Okay, ethics are great in theory, but sometimes doing the right thing can feel like it's going to cost you more in the short term.
Yeah. You're right.
And honestly, sometimes it can.
It can. There can be upfront costs.
Right.
But you have to look at the long-term impact.
Exactly.
And, this chapter actually talks about your own experience with this,
Oh, yeah.
with this very dilemma.
Oh, yeah. When I was first starting out, I owned a gas station.
Okay.
And there was this new product, K2.
I remember that.
It was a synthetic drug that was technically legal,
Right.
but let's be real, kind of sketchy.
Yeah.
And other gas stations were making a killing selling it.
Sure.
My partners are all for stocking it.
Oh, wow.
But I just couldn't do it.
Hmm.
My rule was, if I wouldn't sell it to my own kids, I wouldn't sell it to anyone's kids.
I like
So I said no.
You did?
Yeah.
Oh.
Sure, we probably missed out on some quick cash.
Yeah.
But you know what?
What?
Word got around that we were a business people could trust.
Oh, that's great.
And over time, that built incredible loyalty
Yeah.
and goodwill in the community.
That makes sense.
It really does. And it's a perfect example of how ethical choices, even the ones that might seem like a financial disadvantage at first, can have these unexpected positive consequences.
It's about building a reputation for integrity.
Totally.
And, that's not just a feel-good story.
Right.
That's backed by research.
Yeah.
The Journal of Business Ethics found that companies with strong ethical cultures saw almost 40% better performance.
No, 40%.
Yeah, we're talking about productivity, customer satisfaction, even employee retention.
Wow, that's huge.
It
That's
is.
significant.
And Ethisphere, they rank companies based on their ethical practices.
Okay.
They found that the world's most ethical companies consistently outperformed the U.S. large cap index.
So it's the evidence is clear.
Right.
Ethical business isn't just a nice idea. It's a strategy for success.
It is.
Okay, so we've established that ethics are good for business.
Right.
But the chapter breaks down the why even further, like how it all actually works. It lays out 5 key reasons why ethical practices are so vital for success.
Okay.
And the first one, maybe the most important one, is trust.
That makes sense.
In today's world where there's like information overload and constant distractions, it feels like trust is harder to come by than ever.
It really is. It's become like this precious commodity.
Yeah.
And for businesses, building trust is essential, not just with consumers, but with employees too.
Yeah.
Think about it. Talented people want to work for organizations they actually believe in,
Right.
companies that share their values.
Yeah.
And research shows that a company's commitment to ethical behavior is a major factor in attracting and retaining top talent.
Oh, for sure. Especially with millennials who make up a huge part of the workforce now.
Exactly.
So if you want to build a great team and keep them around, being an ethical company is like non-negotiable.
It
It's
is.
like a magnet for talent.
Precisely. And beyond trust and talent, ethical business practices are incredibly effective at mitigating risk.
Oh, interesting. What do you mean by that?
Well, think about the downsides a company faces.
Okay.
Scandals, lawsuits, regulatory issues.
Yeah,
Those can be devastating.
totally.
But ethical companies, because they operate with transparency and integrity, are less likely to encounter these problems.
Uh-huh.
It's like building your business on solid ground instead of shaky foundations.
I like that. It's about creating a business that can weather any storm because it's built on principles, not just profits.
Exactly.
So it's not just about avoiding the bad stuff.
Right.
It's about setting yourself up for long-term success.
Yes. And here's where it gets really interesting. Ethical business practices can actually drive innovation.
Really? I always thought all the rules and restrictions would stifle creativity.
It's a common misconception. But think about it this way.
Okay.
When you're committed to doing things the right way, it forces you to think differently,
Uh-huh.
to find solutions that are both profitable and ethical.
Okay.
It pushes you beyond the easy answers.
Yeah.
And it inspires real innovation.
It's like that saying, necessity is the mother of invention.
Exactly.
When you're operating within ethical boundaries, you have to come up with more creative solutions.
You do. And finally, ethical business practices are crucial for creating long-term sustainability.
Right. And not just environmental sustainability,
Right.
but building a business that can thrive for years to come.
It's about creating a legacy, not just chasing short-term gains.
Yeah. So it's about building a company that you can be proud of,
Yes.
one that has a positive impact on the world.
Absolutely.
It's about thinking beyond profits and considering the consequences of your actions.
That's right.
Okay, so we've covered a lot here.
We have.
And it's clear that ethical business practices are essential for success in today's world.
They are.
But I'm sure you're thinking, this all sounds great, but how do I actually put it into practice? Real-world ethical dilemmas are rarely black and white.
You're absolutely right. They're usually pretty complex.
They are.
Luckily, this chapter provides a practical framework for navigating those tricky situations.
Oh, perfect. Let's dive into that framework in part 2.
Sounds good. It's a 6-step process. Really helps to break down even the most complex ethical challenges into smaller pieces.
Okay.
The first step is all about identifying the ethical issue.
Gotcha.
Really asking those tough questions.
Nice quote.
What are the core values that are at stake here? Who could be affected by my decision and how? It's important to understand the full scope of the ethical dilemma.
So it's kind of like taking a step back
Yeah,
to see the bigger picture.
exactly.
Okay.
And once you've wrapped your head around the situation, the second step is all about gathering information.
Makes sense.
As much as you can.
Okay.
What are the facts? What are the potential consequences, both good and bad, of the different choices you could make?
Right.
It's about being thorough, really understanding the situation before you make any decisions.
It's like that saying, measure twice, cut once.
Yes,
Do
exactly.
your research first.
Exactly. And once you have a good understanding, the third step is to consider all your options.
Okay.
What are the different paths you could take?
Uh-huh.
This is where you can brainstorm, explore all possibilities,
Oh, I like that.
even the ones that might seem unconventional or challenging.
So it's not just about picking from the obvious choices.
Yeah.
It's about thinking outside the box a little bit.
That's right. Then step 4 is where you start to evaluate those options using ethical principles.
Okay.
This is where you think about things like fairness, honesty, transparency,
Uh-huh.
and the potential harm or benefit to everyone involved.
Right.
The chapter emphasizes things like fairness, preventing harm, and respecting everyone's right to make their own choices, things like that.
It's like you're putting each option through this ethics filter.
Yeah, like that.
Okay.
Now, step 5 is when you actually make your decision
Okay.
and you put it into action.
It's time to walk the walk.
Exactly. It's not enough to just talk about ethics. You have to actually live them. And the final step, number 6, is all about reflecting and learning from the experience.
Okay.
After you've implemented your decision, take some time to think about the outcome.
Uh-huh.
Did it work out the way you hoped? Were there any unintended consequences? What could you have done differently?
Right.
This makes ethical decision-making an ongoing process.
So it's not about being perfect.
No.
It's about always trying to improve.
Exactly. And this framework really helps with those tough ethical situations.
Yeah.
It encourages you to move beyond just gut feelings and emotional reactions to make more thoughtful, values-driven decisions.
Love it. Makes a lot of sense.
But the chapter doesn't stop there.
Oh.
It goes on to talk about vulnerability, something I think a lot of people struggle with.
Yeah.
But the author makes a strong case for why vulnerability is actually super important for ethical leadership.
Vulnerability. That's interesting. It's not the first word that comes to mind when I think about leadership, to be honest. How are they connected?
It's about recognizing that leaders are human too, and we're not perfect.
Yeah.
It's about letting go of this idea that you need to have all the answers all the time.
So it's about being real, admitting you don't have it all figured out.
Yeah.
But how does that tie back to ethics?
Well, remember that story about you refusing to sell that K2 product?
Uh-huh.
You didn't just say no with like absolute certainty.
Right.
You were open about your concerns, your doubts, even your own struggles with the decision.
Yeah.
You were vulnerable, and that made you a stronger leader.
You know, thinking back on it,
Yeah.
it did feel kind of scary to admit that I wasn't 100% sure.
But it created trust.
It did. They saw me as a real person, not just some boss giving orders.
That resonates with people.
Yeah.
It shows you're authentic and willing to learn.
And it probably made them feel more comfortable sharing their own concerns and ideas, right?
Absolutely. And there's actually research that backs this up.
Oh, really?
Leaders who are vulnerable, who admit mistakes and ask for help, are seen as more ethical and trustworthy.
It's kind of counterintuitive.
It is.
Yeah.
But it makes sense. People relate to honesty and humility.
It's like that saying, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Exactly. And you know what?
What?
This chapter has some really great practical tips on building a more ethical business.
Oh, perfect. I bet our listeners are ready to put all this great information into action.
I think so too. So welcome back to our deep dive into the ethics advantage. It's been quite a journey.
It has.
We've really uncovered how ethical business practices are no longer optional.
Yeah.
They're essential for building a truly successful business.
Absolutely. And I think we can officially say we busted that myth that nice guys finish last.
I think so.
Because we've seen how integrity can be a huge advantage.
It's true. And what's really interesting is that this whole shift towards ethical business,
Yeah.
it really aligns with what consumers and employees are looking for these days.
In what way?
They're not just looking for products or jobs anymore.
Right.
They want to support companies that share their values,
Uh-huh.
companies they can actually believe in.
It's like we're seeing a whole new definition of success.
Yeah.
It's not just about profits anymore. It's about purpose, impact, making a real difference.
And that's where ethical leadership really comes in.
Makes sense.
It's about setting the tone for the whole company, creating a culture where doing the right thing is just built into how they do business.
And it's important to remember that ethical leadership doesn't mean being perfect.
Right.
We all make mistakes,
We do.
but the key is being transparent about them,
Yeah.
learning from them,
Yeah.
and doing better next time.
Exactly. And the chapter really emphasized the importance of vulnerability for leaders.
Yeah.
Admitting you don't have all the answers, being open about challenges.
Right.
That's what builds trust and connection.
Like, it's about being real, being human, and letting that show in your business.
It is.
And honestly, it takes a lot of pressure off.
I agree.
You don't have to pretend to have it all figured out.
It's so liberating.
It really is.
It opens the door for those genuine connections with your team, with your
Awesome.
customers, even your competitors.
Totally. Now, before we wrap up,
Yep.
I want to touch on something that was mentioned throughout the chapter.
Okay.
Your ethics are your brand. Let that sink in for a second.
A good one.
It is. In a world where there are so many choices, what makes your business stand out?
That's the question, isn't it?
Yeah, what message are you sending through your actions, your decisions, how you treat others?
If your ethics are your brand, What story are you telling?
What values are you embodying?
And ultimately, what kind of impact are you having on the world?
Those are some big questions.
They are.
But I think they get to the heart of what it means to build an ethical business.
I think so too, because the choices we make as business leaders,
Uh-huh.
they have consequences that go way beyond just our bottom line.
It's true.
They shape the world around us
They do.
and the future we're creating.
And I really believe that by focusing on ethical business practices, we can create a world where success isn't just about profit.
It's about more than that.
It's also about purpose, integrity, and making a positive impact.
I agree. So as we wrap up this deep dive, let's remember the key takeaways.
Okay.
Ethical business isn't just good for the soul.
Right.
It's a real way to build a thriving company.
We've seen the proof.
We have. And having a strong ethical framework,
Mm-hmm.
like the 6-step process we talked about,
Yeah.
is essential for making those tough calls and building a company culture based on integrity.
And we can't forget about vulnerability.
Right. It's such an important part of ethical leadership.
It really is.
It allows us to connect with people in a more genuine way.
Absolutely. And I think the biggest takeaway is this. Building an ethical business is a journey, not a destination.
It's a process.
It is. It's about constantly learning, growing, and always trying to do better.
So what will your first step be?
Yeah, what action can you take today to build a business you're proud of?
One that reflects your values and makes the world a better place.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the ethics advantage.
It's been a pleasure.
Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep making a positive impact through your work.
We'll see you then.